Om Sadashiva Samarambham
Shankaracharya-madhyamam
Asmadacharya Paryantam
Asmadacharya-paryantam
Vande
Vande
Guru
Guru
Paramparam
Paramparam.
Om
Om
Sahanavavatu
Sahana Sahano
Sahanapurvatu
Bhunaktu
Sahaviryam
Saviryam
Karvavahe
Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu
Tejasvinavaditamastu
Ma
Vidvishavahe
Vidvishavahe.
Om
Om
Shanti
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 Shanti.
Om Tat Sat, Om Namah Shivaya. Good morning.
Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya.
Okay, so we were on the Anuvaka number 6. We had gone halfway through it, and we were looking at the parts of the mantra. So kamayataha bahusyam prajayeti sa tapotapyata sa tapastaptva idagam sarvam asrujat. Okay, so kamayata, he desired, that we saw earlier, he desired. And what did he desire? Bahusyam prajayeti, let me become many. And then we had a discussion on Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti. We also talked about the sort of desire that it was. And then we said that it is Shuddha desire, non-binding desire. So it doesn't really bind Brahman. Okay, having done that, then he says, Sa tapotapyataha sa tapas tapva, having performed the tapas. And this tapas, of course, is basically, tapas, which is visualization, as we talked about in the last class. We performed the tapas. Now we say, what is this now? The kriya, the action. Ichha was there, the jnanam was there, ichha was there. Now it is the kriya, the action of creating. So he says, saha idadam sarvam asrujat. Saha asrujat. He created what? Sarvam idam. All this he created. And what else did he create? Yat kincha. Whatever else is there in creation, that is also created by him only. So the yat kincha is telling us that whatever has been created is created by that Ishvara only. Whatever is experienced by us is a creation only. And therefore Ishvara is nimitta karanam also, upadana karanam also. Okay. Now the question might come up. Normally when we plan or create something, there is first a visualization process, a conceptualization process. Supposing you are going to build a building, right? Then there's a blueprint. The architect is called in, a detailed blueprint is made out, and then the construction takes place. And therefore, between the visualization, the conceptualization, and between the implementation, normally there is some time gap and there's a lot of effort also. Okay, but here it's like you doing something without that effort, only by the sankalpa, only by the wish alone. Where does this happen? You do it regularly in your dream. The dream is created out of sankalpa alone. The sankalpa and the dream, there is no gap. The moment the sankalpa occurs, the dream comes. So sankalpa matrena, the process is effortless. And so Shastra says, just like that effortless creation of the dream world, Bhagavan creates this universe also effortlessly. And of course, just like the dream world is mithya, the Jagat, the creation, is also mithya. There is a parallel there, right? The dream world is created by your sankalpa, by the jiva sankalpa, but the universe is created by the Ishvara sankalpa. So sankalpa matrena idam mithya jagat asrajata. He created this mithya universe simply by the mental resolution saying, let me create. And therefore this bahusyam prajayeti, remember, there is no new universe being created. That universe with all its jivas is already there in an unmanifest form in Maya, right? the Antaryami Ishvara is already there, containing all these. So the Bahusyam Prajayeti is simply the conversion of the unmanifest Nama Rupa, which we call Maya, into the manifest Nama Rupa, which we call Jagat. Okay, right. Now, that's the reason for the creation. Now we go to the next topic, which is a very, very important topic in Shastram. It is called Anupravesha. Anupravesha literally means entry. And therefore you will find that there are many Anupravesha sections in Upanishads. Like Taittiriya has one, Chandogya has one, Brihadaranyaka has one, and they're all considered very, very important. So we will read that. The next portion is Tat Srishtva Tadevanu Pravishat Tad Anupravishya. These are the three small sentences which are the Anupravesha Vakya. So Tat Srishtva, having created that. Srishtva means created. Tat is the universe. Idam Jagat Srishtva. So Tat Srishtva is Idam Jagat Srishtva. After creating this entire universe, which means what? Remember that this is Maya involved. Maya is the Upadana Karanam. Maya is Jadam, and therefore, immediately on creation of the universe, what is Upadana Karanam? Maya. So Shastra is saying that he created an inert universe. The universe is Jadam. He created the universe which was inert. And an inert universe is meaningless because the very purpose of the universe is what? It's meant for use by the jivas to address their karma. They have to get the benefits or the sufferings from their individual punya papam, and that is what the universe is meant for. And therefore, there has to be a second stage. The first stage is the creation of that inert universe. Second stage is Tadeva Anupravishat. Tadeva, he himself, that same Brahman himself, Anupravishat, he enters the world as a jiva or as jivas. And if you read the Shankarabhashyam, there is a very elaborate commentary on Anupravesha Vakyam because it is considered a very important portion of the Shruti, any Shruti. Okay, to understand this, let us go to the normal example which we use, the dream world, the Swapna Prapancha example, right? Who creates the Swapna Prapancha? Remember, it's a very important question. Who creates the Swapna Prapancha? It requires a bit of thinking to answer that question.
The dreamer, the sleeper.
So June says the dreamer creates.
Waker.
And Vinita says the waker creates. So 1 plus 1 for and 1 against. Anybody else?
The dream is the replay of whatever we have experienced during the waking state. That is what so far we have understood about the dream state.
Okay. Fine. So I'll grant it to you. It is the waker who creates. Right? It's not the dreamer who creates. It is the waker who creates the dream world. Then the question is, if I as the waker have created the dream world, I the waker have no access to the dream world. Right? You agree? I may have created the dream world as a waker.
Yes.
But I, the waker, have absolutely no access to the dream world. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Everybody agrees? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Then, if I have to enter the dream world, what do I have to do? I can't enter the dream world with my sthula shariram, with my gross body. And therefore, what do? I give myself a dream body. right? A swapna shariram I give. And now the waker who is outside the dream world enters the dream world, but not as the waker. He enters the dream world as the dreamer with a dream shariram. The waker has created the world. The waker has created every object in that world. But remember, it is not the dreamer who is creating. What is the main proof that it is not the dreamer who is creating the dream world?
When the dream ends, you're back into your world, which is the
That's
normal
one proof.
world.
Okay, that's one proof. Anybody else? What is the
If
main
a
proof?
if a tiger eats the dreamer, the dreamer might seem that he's dying in the dream, but when he wakes up,
Yeah,
he knows that he's alive,
yeah, right.
and he realizes it was just a dream.
Okay, so the dreamer is completely conditioned by the dream world, right? When the tiger comes, the dreamer cannot say, oh, this is a tiger, but I created this tiger and therefore there is no problem. He cannot say, he does not say, because he's got the dream body, he's in the dream world. The dream tiger also he is. Everything he alone is, but the waker is, not the dreamer. The waker is the dream world, the waker is the dream object, waker is the dream tiger, the waker is also the person, dream jiva, being chased by the tiger. Right? So this is the understanding. In the same way, Ishvara having created this world, as Ishvara, as a formless Ishvara, he needs to enter the world to give it consciousness. And therefore he enters the world as Jiva also. And therefore, if somebody asks you, who creates the dream world, it is the waker who creates. If somebody asks you, who experiences dream world, you can say it is the waker, but in his avatar as a dreamer. The waker himself has no access. So what is the mechanism, to use language of science? What is the mechanism for entering this dream? So until the dream is created, I have not gone to sleep. Okay, I am identified with the physical body and I know I am the waker. So I am lying on the bed, I am turning and twisting, I am putting on the AC, I am putting on the fan, I am covering myself. I have access to my physical body. I am identified with my physical body. Sthula, Sarira, Abhimani. To use Tattva language, I am. What do I know? I am trying to go to sleep. Okay. Now, the moment I fall asleep, that in the process of falling asleep, as a waker, I create the entire dream world. I also create a special body for my use, a dream body. And on creation of the dream body, I enter that dream body and I drop my Vyavaharika Sthula Sharira. I drop my identity as Vishwa and I take on a new identity as Tejasa. So once I have put on my Tejasa robe, Tejasa clothes, then the Jagrat Prapancha is no longer accessible to me. Right? And therefore the body lying on the bed, even though prana is functioning, the body lying on the bed is as if it is dead to the Jagrat Prapancha, to the waking world. And that is why traditionally, if somebody asks you what is the reason that in India, the moment you get up, you should take a bath. Because most people who have had a Vedic upbringing will take a bath in the early morning. Even if it is winter, they will put on the geyser and take a bath. That is because tradition says that during this dream state, your physical body has become a corpse, as if has become dead. And therefore, a dead body is considered impure, ashaucham. And therefore, purification is a must. So you must be knowing that whenever you go for a cremation, right? Or whenever you go to a house where a dead body is there, somebody died and you visit that house. When you come back, the first thing you're supposed to do is what? Have a bath, right? So this is the reason. When you are in contact with a dead body, in this case, somebody else's dead body you have seen, you may not even have touched, it has been in your vicinity, and yet tradition says you must have a bath. How much more so if it is your own body which was lying like a dead body throughout the night or throughout the dream period, and therefore tradition says that you must have a bath every morning. Anyway, that's by the way. Okay, now therefore the creator, the cause, the karanam of the dream world, who is who? Who is the waker? So the waker is the karanam, the creator of the swapna prapancha. And that very waker, he becomes a product, the dreamer. So you become, as a waker, you are the creator. In the dream world, what have you become? You have become the dreamer. The same consciousness which was Vishwa as a waker, that same consciousness now is identified with the Swapna Shariram, with the dream body, and therefore you are no longer the creator. You have, because of the very change of identification, nothing else has taken place. The consciousness is the same. As a creator, you are identified with the physical body, with the Sthula Shariram. As a dreamer, you are Sukshma Sharira Abhimani. That's Swapna Sharira Abhimani you become. And therefore, from the status, exalted status of creator, you have dropped to the status of creation, the Karyam. And because you have become the creation, you think you are limited. When you wake up, what do you know? That I was the waker, I am the waker, and it was nobody else than I alone who was the dreamer. The experiencer, I, is the same, but the media is different. One was Thula Shariram, one was Swapana Shariram. Right. Now a question can be asked, why do you say, or what is the proof that the waker alone is the dreamer? What is the proof that the waker is the dreamer?
Because when we wake up, um,
Yeah, go ahead,
because
too.
when,
Go ahead.
thank
Go
you,
ahead, June.
Vinitaji.
Yeah.
When we wake up, we remember that we were dreaming somehow,
Right.
but the
So
dreamer is not there anymore.
you remember the dream, and therefore you were the witness to the dream, right? And since the bodies were different, there is some entity which was a witness to both. An entity who says this happened elsewhere else, that entity has to have been there in both the places. And therefore, you, the Sakshi, you, the witness consciousness, are the witness not only of the Swapna Prapancha, not only of the dream world, but also of the waking world, of the Jagrata Avastha also. Unless they are the same, you as a waker will never know what happened in the dream. The very fact that you remember the dream means that you alone were there, of course, in a different body. Okay. And of course, you know that when I was within the dream, I felt I am very limited because I did not know that the whole dream was nothing but my own creation. Therefore, when I come out, now I know that I am not limited by the dream world because I was the very creator. And therefore, a very important corollary is there. Whether you are the Karanam or the Karyam depends upon what? Upon which body you are identified with. If you are identified with the waker's body, you are the Karana. If you are identified with the dreamer's body, you are the Karyam, the product. And you can extract from there. When you are identified with Paramatma, you are the creator. When you are identified with your own body, you are the creation, the Jiva alone. Okay. And therefore he says, hence he says, Tat Srishtva. Having created this prapancha, the Paramatma entered the three prapancha. You have to say here, all the three prapanchas, all the three dream worlds, the Paramatma entered. All the three bodies, the Paramatma entered. And the same Paramatma is now the Jivatma. And having become the Jivatma, he after entering the bodies, therefore all transactions which happen or which take place by the Jivatma, you have to understand that it is the Paramatma alone who does all transactions, even though he is in the body of a Jivatma. What has happened? Paramatma has become Jivatma. All actions by Jivatma basically are done by Paramatma only, but he does not know that. So the dream can be enjoyed, right? Dreams can be enjoyed. But when the dream becomes something which is not welcome, then you need to get to the teaching and tell yourself, okay, I am actually the Paramatma, not the Jiva. And therefore, I mentioned that there was a Kaivalya Upanishad mantra. Sa eva maya parimohitatma sharira masthaya karoti sarvam triyanna panadi vichitra bhogaihi sa eva jagarat paritriptineti. I hope some of you have gone back and revised. Would you like to tell me what that mantra means? What does that mantra mean? It is from Kaivalya Upanishad. Yes, Payal, would you like to say?
Yes, Acharya.
Boliye.
The mind which is deluded by Maya and the Paramatma himself identify with the body.
Okay.
And does all the karma. And he himself attain different form of enjoyment and sense object.
Okay. So what is being mentioned is that Maya Parimohita Atma Sa Eva. That very Paramatma himself, who has no desires, who is always content. What happened? Maya Parimohita. His mind deluded by or clouded by Maya, identified with Sharira Masthaya, identified with the Jiva's body. What does it do? In that body, Karoti Sarvam, performs all actions, and Jagrat Eva, he himself is in the Jagrat state, but not knowing that he is ever fulfilled. Eti Paritriptam, he attains fulfillment. How? Stri Annapanadi Vichitra Bhogaihi, through various sense objects, food, drink, etc. He begins his search in the world for fulfillment, not knowing that he is completely fulfilled. So that's the same thing which is now being said in Taittiriya Upanishad. It has already been said in the mantra of Kaivalya Upanishad. So in Jagrada Avastha, I have my gross body. In Swapna Avastha, I have my dream body, subtle body. But in Shushupti Avastha, I have neither of these bodies. And therefore, I remain as pure consciousness. Right? Now, the thing is, nobody ever doubts his own existence. The Jivatma, any Jivatma you ask, will say, of course I exist. He will not say, oh, I don't know, I need to ask. He will say, I exist. And The Anupravesha Vakyam says, because of the entry of the Paramatma into the Jivatma, it is the Paramatma alone who plays the role of the Jivatma. And that is Shruti Vakyam. You cannot doubt it. It has to be taken as the very basic truth. And you put them both together. You put the Shruti Vakyam which says Paramatma himself has entered Jivatma, and you take your own Anubhava which says, yes, I exist. What is the conclusion? Paramatma doubtlessly exists. Okay. Okay, any questions so far? The Anupravesha Vakyam is very important because it's telling you that it is a very Paramatma who is doing all the actions. And if you think you exist, how can you ever doubt that Paramatma exists? Okay, I'll take it that there are no doubts. Okay, now in his, yes, anybody? Okay, now in his, what do you call, Bhashyam, Shankara introduces a Purva Pakshi. So this Purva Pakshi comes and says, you are saying that Ishvara creates the world and then Ishvara does Anupravesha, enters the world. That is not logical. Why? Because Ishvara is Upadana Karanam. Why is it not logical to say that Upadana Karanam enters the Jagat? Because Upadana Karanam by definition is already there. Right? It is like saying that clay produces the pot and then enters the pot. The statement doesn't make sense because clay is already there in the pot. Where is the question of clay entering the pot? Right? This is the objection by one Purva Pakshi. Okay, in the meantime, another Purva Pakshi comes and says, okay, let me explain. He tells the first Purva Pakshi, you have not understood. You are confused. And Shankara is also confused. So let me tell you how it happens. So he says this clay has two aspects. One part is wet clay and the other part is dry clay. Right? So in the process of creation of the pot, what happens? Shruti said, first the pot is created. So the wet clay gets converted into the pot. Then Shruti says, the clay entered the pot. So after, it is the wet clay which has become the pot. And therefore later on, it is the dry clay which enters the pot. The mixture of dry and wet clay is what is meant by creation and entry. Anupravesha is the entry of the dry clay. And similarly, he says, from the same example, Brahman has two parts. One part becomes the inert universe. That is to say, the Upadana Karanam. Brahman has two parts, Upadana Karanam and Nimitta Karanam. The Upadana Karanam, the material is converted into the universe, and the other part, the conscious part, enters the universe as Jivatma. Okay. Now, we say that this example has a defect in logic. Can you figure out? The example of the pot, wet clay forming the pot and dry clay entering the pot, when compared to Ishvara creating and entering the universe, there is a logical defect, yukti dosha. Can you make out what it is?
It is infinite. How can it have parts?
So you have to talk about something which is there in the clay example, not being in the Ishvara example. That is the logical defect.
There's no such thing as wet clay and dry clay mixture. It's only water and clay mixture, so presence and absence of water.
Okay, that's a good point, but that is not what is meant here. What is the main difference is that the clay is not all pervading. Whether it is wet or dry, it is not sarvavyapi, and therefore the dry clay can enter the pot. But in the case of Brahman, Brahman is all pervading and is already present in the world. So how can it enter? Okay. Now here comes the interesting part. When you say this, a third Purvapakshi comes and says, no, you're not understood. It is like saying that Brahman has different parts, right? Now, for example, Brahman enters the universe just like your hand enters your mouth. In the same way, Brahman enters the universe. And we say, of course, this is wrong, illogical, because you are talking about three things: the hand, the mouth, and the empty space in the mouth. They are all parts. What does Shruti say? Brahman is without parts. So you cannot give a suggestion which is violative of Shruti, so we don't accept. Then comes a very, very interesting suggestion from the fourth Purvapakshi. It's a very, very interesting suggestion. He says the entry of Brahman has to be understood as the formation of the reflected consciousness in the mind of all the jivas. And this Purvapakshi gives example. He says, when the sun is reflected in the water, do you not say that sun has entered the water and formed the reflection? This is what is meant by saying Brahman is entering the jiva or the universe. Do you see any objection to this? You won't, right? This is what we say also. Reflected consciousness. If Brahman enters the reflecting medium, the reflecting consciousness is formed. And therefore, that is called the RC. Okay, that is the normal understanding of RC. Everybody is clear about that? RC is the reflected consciousness which is formed in the reflecting media because of the entry or the contact of the media with the original consciousness. Everybody is on board with that explanation? I hope. Okay.
Yes, sir.
But here, Shankara gives a completely different answer. Okay. Now remember, the same Shankara in the Anupravesh Vakya of Chandogya Upanishad, he has accepted that yes, it is the formation of the consciousness in the mind which we take as Anupraveshya, entry of Brahman. But in Taittiriya Upanishad, he says no. He says, even though generally the understanding of Pratibimbam, reflected consciousness, Pratibimba Chaitanyam, reflected consciousness. So we take it as reflection of consciousness. But here Shankara says, don't use the word Pratibimba Chaitanyam. Use the word Pratibimba Abhasa Chaitanyam. Something which is very similar to reflected consciousness. And this is a very important point. You don't find it anywhere else. It's a complete refinement. It's a advancement to our idea of what is reflected consciousness. Why does Shankara give the interpretation? What is the difference between the example of the sun entering the water and Brahman entering the universe or the jiva? Is there any difference at all, or are they exactly the same? It's an argument you don't find anywhere else. So you should know absolutely pakka what we are saying. Yes, Meda.
There's a very minute difference in the sense that there can be a separation of sun and water, but there can never be a separation of Brahman and Jagat.
Excellent, right? That's the reason, that is the exact reason why Shankara says Pratibimba Abhasa Chaitanya. Why? Because sun belongs to Vyavaharika Satyam, water belongs to Vyavaharika Satyam, and therefore a product of that will also be Vyavaharika Satyam. The reflection of the sun in the water is also Vyavaharika Satyam. All three, the original sun, the water, the RM, and the reflection, the RC, all three belonging to Vyavaharika Satyam, because, and therefore they are all different. There is a separation, as Meda said, between the original sun and the reflecting medium. Okay. While in the case of Brahman and the body mind sense complex, one belongs to Satyam, one belongs to Mithya. Mithya means really it is dependent upon Satyam. There is no separation possible because they are two different levels of reality. Mithya itself is a dependent entity, like the ring or the necklace is nothing but gold. Every Mithya object in this universe is nothing but Brahman. And therefore, this separation of reflected medium and original consciousness and reflected entity, that separation is just not possible because there are no two entities. There is only one Brahman, and therefore you cannot use the word RC very strictly. We do use RC. In fact, Sankara himself agrees with RC in the other Upanishad. But remember, it's a compromised usage. Strictly speaking, Shankara himself says, Suryakadi Pratibimbodaya Syat. When the image of the sun is formed in the water, what has happened? A limited entity, Parichinnasya Murtasya, a limited entity has been in contact with another limited entity. One finite entity, which is the sun, has come into contact with another finite entity, which is the water, and therefore the reflection is possible. But since Brahman is not finite and has no form at all, because it is all pervading, therefore there is no space possible. And you understand that as there is no separation possible between the reflection or the reflected entity, which is Brahman, and the reflecting medium, which is the mind. Since the separation is not possible, where is the second entity? There is no second entity at all. That is what Advaitam is all about. There is no second entity at all which can create a reflection. Hence the argument that reflection can be understood as pravesha should not be accepted. It is the exact opposite of what he says in other Upanishads, but it's a very good refinement in our own understanding. Therefore, when you say RC, at the back of your mind from today onwards, remember it is as if a reflection. Because really speaking, reflection requires two entities. The original entity, which is being reflected, and the reflecting medium. And there are no two entities because Brahman and the body mind sense complex are not different. So, as I said, in Chandogya Upanishad, he takes a completely different interpretation. He says that Chandogya Upanishad also has got Anupravesha Vakyam. So we'll see when we enter that. So he says Brahman entering the mind is the RC. The formation of the RC in the mind, which is the Jiva, right? RC is Jiva. The formation of RC in the mind is the Anupravesha. Right? One must clearly remember all the entities involved. Brahman is OC, the mind is your RM, The formation of the RC is the Jiva, that is the Anupravesha. That is the interpretation in Chandogya. And here, it's a different interpretation. So he says you cannot take it, Anupravesha, as the formation of the RC. He says you should here take the Anupravesha as the fact that Brahman can be recognized in the mind, not available in the mind. Very subtle difference, because availability is already there, right? And the fact that, in fact, for that matter, Brahman is available on in the table also. But you can't recognize consciousness in the table. You can recognize Sat, existence principle, you can recognize in the table, but the consciousness principle requires subtle body to be recognized. And therefore, he says, the fact that Brahman can be recognized in the mind, that is to be taken as Anupravesha. Two different interpretations, right? Okay. Now, there are other, acharyas, like the very respected acharya called Vidyaranya. He mixes the two interpretations and says both are okay, right? Anyway, so when the RC is formed, what happens? The mind or the RM, which was earlier inert, that becomes self-aware, right? The mind is Panchamahabhutani, inert. Until Brahman enters. Now, again, there is no real, time gap between body being formed and Brahman entering and all that. So, this explanation, giving sequences only for understanding purposes. But you have to understand that the moment the body is formed, Brahman is entering simultaneously. Okay, that for the understanding. So, here for explanation purposes, the moment before Brahman enters the body, moment before RC is formed, the mind is inert, the body is inert. It becomes sentient and self-aware only when Brahman enters the body as the RC. Now, when I say self-aware, what is the expression of the self-awareness? When you are self-aware, how do you express that thought?
Through the Sukshma Shariram?
No.
Are we
Self-awareness,
talking about Ji?
self-awareness is a thought.
The I
Yeah.
thought.
I am.
I am.
I am thought is the I thought, as we call it. That is the awareness, that is the expression of the self-awareness. The moment the inert mind has become aware, the I thought comes into picture, right? So, in that I thought, what all are present? The thought itself is RM. Remember, the I thought is RM, therefore it is inert. But since now I am saying that RC is there, I am is a thought expressing self-awareness. Wherever there is RC, remember it is unsaid. You don't have to say it. OC will be also there. Why? OC is all pervading. It is the very pervasion of the OC in the RM which gives rise to the RC, the I thought. Therefore, in your mind, you have a mixture. The mind is the RM. In that RM, you have a mixture of RC and OC always. Therefore, in the I thought, the Aham Vritti, a very important thing to remember with, in the Aham Vritti, both RC is available and OC is available. Both RC and OC are both available in the Aham Vritti, the I thought. Right? Now, and this I thought, now again, the I thought has three pieces: RM, RC, OC. So this OC part, which is what really brings about the self-awareness, that OC part is what is meant by Sakshi Chaitanyam. Okay, this Sakshi is very often used, very often misunderstood word. Sakshi Chaitanyam is the OC available in the mind. The word Sakshi cannot, should not be applied to consciousness, reflected consciousness. Sakshi is not the all-pervading consciousness. Sakshi is the consciousness which is in the mind because of the association of the OC with the RM. Therefore, that remember that RC and OC are, they are non-separatable. But that OC part, which is in the mind along with the RC part, that OC part is Sakshi Chaitanya. And that is what is meant when Shruti says Brahman is revealed as Sakshi Chaitanyam, obtaining in and as part of the Jiva, as part of the RC. RC is what? RC plus OC plus RM. So leaving the RM part out, the consciousness aspects are two, the reflected one and the original one. The original one, which is there in your mind, is called Sakshi Chaitanyam. The reflected consciousness is called Pramata. So in a Jiva, when you say RC, we are using the word RC loosely, but when you say RC, or more appropriately, when you say Jiva, there are two components, RC, OC. I'm not taking the mind because they're already there. So RC and OC are there. RC is Pramata. OC is Sakshi Chaitanyam, but not the all-pervading OC. That OC available in the mind along with the RC, that part is called Sakshi Chaitanya. And of course, the reflecting medium is the thought, the vritti itself. Why is it so very important? Because in this I thought, aham vritti, if you want to arrive at Sakshi Chaitanyam, you have to exclude two things, the RM and the RC. The vritti itself and the pramata, the knower, you have to exclude. What remains is the third piece, witness consciousness. Brahman enters the mind as the RC. Remember, Brahman enters the mind as the RC, but is available in the mind only as OC. So why does Shruti talk about this Anupravesha at all? Because Brahman is not available anywhere else as Sakshi other than in the mind. Okay, that is why I explained to you what exactly is Sakshi Chaitanya. As Sakshi Chaitanyam, Brahman is available only in the mind along with the OC. And again I'll repeat, Sakshi Chaitanyam is not the all-pervading consciousness. It is that consciousness, not the reflected one. It is that consciousness available in the I thought, available along with the RC. So in the I thought, which is the RM, you have two things, RC and OC. That OC which is available along with the RC is called Sakshi Chaitanyam. The RC itself is called Pramata. And that is available, this Sakshi is available only in the mind. Everywhere else, Brahman is of course available, but available as Sat, as existence principle. And for recognizing existence, you of course require consciousness. And this consciousness is there as a Sakshi. It can be recognized by me only. in my RC. I cannot recognize the Sakshi in you. I can only recognize the Sakshi in me. Why? Because the Sakshi has no attributes at all. And there's a very interesting part of this, Let us say that I put up my hand, okay, and there's total darkness. The hand is not visible. Then I put on the light. You can see my hand. So we normally say that it is the light because of which the hand is seen. But there is another side to this. What is that? The normal thing you say is, because of the light, my hand is seen. But there is another part of it. That light is seen because of the hand. It is not that, the hand depends on the light for being seen. That statement is true. But the reverse is also true. That for the light to be seen, the hand is necessary. If the hand is not there, the light cannot be recognized. They are mutually dependent upon each other for recognition. And therefore Vedanta says that consciousness in its pure form cannot be recognized without the mind, without the RM. In other words, if you have no mind, you cannot say I am. And therefore both the statements are true. Consciousness illumines the mind, number one. Mind illumines consciousness. And it is where the mind and the consciousness meet. It is a sandhi, the junction where the mind and consciousness meet. That junction alone, the I thought, self-awareness is possible. So in this self-awareness, there are three components: RM, mind; RC, Pramata; OC, Sakshi. Brahman can be recognized as Sakshi component of these three. Why? Only because of the RM, because of which that Brahman is manifest. And Shankara says this is the means for recognizing Brahman as Sakshi. And why is it important to us? Because in your spiritual sadhana, in your jnana sadhana, the Sakshi status is a very critical status. You have to retain that Sakshi status for a very, very, very long time. Almost your entire life, you may say, or for some people, multiple lives. The Sakshi status of Brahman has to be understood. Why? Because the Sakshi status is the very foundation for Brahman status. Right? It's important because continuously carrying the Aham Sakshi status in your mind. Remember, Aham Sakshi is not Aham, all-pervading Chit. You are saying, I am the consciousness which is available in the mind along with the RC. That is the Sakshi status. So that Sakshi status is necessary because it is the only thing which can displace your Jiva status. And therefore, as a spiritual sadhaka, I have to retain that Sakshi status until my Jiva status has been replaced. Right? And once the Jiva status is eliminated from my subconscious, then I can let go of the Sakshi and then I can say, Aham Brahma Asmi. Until then, Aham Sakshmi Asmi. I am that consciousness which is available in the mind along with the RC. And therefore, from Pramatra Bhava, from the RC attitude, I have to come to Sakshi Bhava. the Sakshi attitude and remain there soaked in that Sakshi Bhava, like the lime in the pickle sauce, until Sakshi Bhava drives out the Jiva Bhava. And therefore, in our eagerness to become Jivan Muktas, we should never be over eager to negate this Sakshi Bhava. You have to carry it with you till it achieves its purpose, which is to drive out the Jiva Bhava from your mind. And therefore, since you have to carry Sakshi status, you have to carry the binary format also for a very long time. We say binary format is Aham Brahmasmi. No. Binary format is knowing that I am the Sakshi. Once Jiva Bhava has been replaced, then you are ready to eat the pickle, come out of the sauce. Then you're ready to draw up the Jiva Bhava. And Shankara gives a very nice example. He says it is like the connection that Rahu has with the moon and the sun. Okay. What is this Rahu? When the earth is between the sun and the moon, right? The earth is here, sun is here, moon is here. Now, this side of the earth, which is facing the sun, is lighted up. The side of the earth not facing the sun is dark. It's in shadow, right? But Shankara says this shadow, Rahu, is not manifested. When do you know there is a shadow on that part of the earth? When the moon is there and the earth is in the middle, and therefore the shadow falls on the earth, on the moon, as a partial or full eclipse. What is the reason he says that? Because it is the moon which shows to you that there is a shadow. That's why Rahu is called Chaya Graha, a planet in the form of a shadow. What is the shadow? This shadow is the shadow of the earth falling on the moon. And he says the same connection is there between Brahman and the mind. The mind is the manifester because of which Brahman is seen. It is the means for recognizing Brahman. And therefore, you should never let go of that. From Brahman, remember, the RC goes to the mind, and therefore, mind serves as a reflecting medium. Then after that, RC goes through sense organs and all that. So from Brahman, first, we saw this in Drik Drishya Viveka also. The first is the mind. Mind gets activated, mind gets sentient. Then the RC flows out through sense organs. And then the world gets illuminated. Therefore, the world is illuminated, but not directly, because the connection is indirect. And therefore, since mind is said to be the closest with consciousness, therefore, the mind becomes the means of recognizing Brahman. And that is why Shruti talks about Anupravesha. Okay. Any questions so far? Very important section. So I would ask you to go through it several times. Just one more point here is that when we say Brahman is dependent upon the mind, you should be very careful about the words that you use, right? Brahman is dependent upon the mind for the recognition of Brahman's existence, right? Sakshi can be recognized. The OC, which is the consciousness existing in the mind, along with RC, can be recognized only because of the mind. And therefore, you say Brahman is dependent upon the mind. But you have to be very careful. Only for recognition of its existence, not for its existence. Brahman does not depend upon anything for existence. It's nityam. But for recognition of the existence, the mind is required. And therefore, to sum up, there are two meanings for Anupravesha. One is Brahman forming the RC in the mind. One is Brahman being available as the OC in the mind, as a Sakshi in the mind. So, Chandogya takes the first meaning. Our Brahman forming the RC is Anupravesha. Taittiriya takes this particular text. Taittiriya says, no, Brahman being available as Sakshi, that is Anupravesha. Okay. With this, we'll stop for the day. Any questions? Very, very important section. I would ask you to again and again and again go through this.
Sir. I
Yes,
will
Vinay.
need to go through this. There
All
are
of us.
many small questions which arise, which I need to sort out first with my thinking, and then I will post what the
Yeah.
another request, sir. This has been a beautiful Upanishad so far, but a tough one compared to the earlier ones. So may I request you that at the end of it, after we finish the Bhrigu Valli, you summarize it for us, if possible, or
We'll
one
try,
of the
but
senior teachers.
we seriously actually are running short of time. So anyway, let me see what can be done. Okay.
Yes, sir, because each Anuvaka or each class by itself I'm understanding, I don't want to talk for the others, but the continuity somewhere is not coming into my mind, sir. Maybe my limitation, but I would just like you to, if
This
possible.
second Valli is a bit difficult. I know it's Jnana Yoga, but
Yes.
third Valli is
Yes.
again sadhana only. So I don't think you'll find a problem there.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. I will go through this. My first thing that came to my mind is, sir, Sakshi and Pramata, then we are making two different sections, because then the Sakshi is the OC which we are saying is in the mind.
There are two different things, OC and RC.
Yeah, and the RC is the Pramata which we
RC
are.
is Pramata, and OC is Sakshi. But that OC which is in the mind. Normally, when you use the OC, you mean all-pervading OC, which is not what is meant. The all-pervading OC cannot do anything. Only this OC in your mind, along with the Sakshi, that is the witness consciousness.
Right. Thank you so much.
Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for your patience. Om Om.